Welcome to a bonus follow-up episode of I Catch Killers. Back in 2023, our guest, Jerildene Cane, reached out to me to discuss the murder investigation of her sister, Leisl Smith. Lisel was just 23 years old when she vanished from the central coast of New South Wales. That was back in 2012. The police at the time believed she had been murdered and that they knew who was responsible. They were in the process of getting answers for Liesl's family. They had charged the partner, James Scott Church, with her murder. And there was a lengthy judge-only murder trial that sat for over 68 days. And at its completion, Justice Elizabeth Fulton indicated she would hand down her verdict on the 8th of July 2022. So Jerildene and her family had been waiting for this moment for 10 years. But the day that they'd been waiting for was taken away from them when James Church took his own life, just a day before the verdict was to be handed down. Jerildene was informed that due to a rigid legal system that seems to lack any compassion, that the verdict could not be made available to the family. I know it sounds unbelievable, but that's what Jerildene was faced with. Now, I always believe that if the law was broken or failed the people it's there to serve, it should be changed. After the meeting with Jerildene, I suggested that the simplest way this hurdle could be overcome was for the matter to be referred to the coroner. And then the coroner could deliver a finding that would perhaps give answers for the family. This course of action was without precedent, but to me it seemed like a simple fix. So, on the back of those discussions, Jerildene appeared on I Catch Killers, and we lobbied in the media with the lawmakers to see if this could be achieved. Well, it makes me very happy to announce that Jerildene's efforts were rewarded, and on the 29th of September this year, Deputy State Coroner Harriet Graham found that Leisl Smith was killed by her partner, James Scott Church. So, I thought I'd get Jerildene back on the podcast to give us an update and discuss the impact this whole process has had on her. Jerildene Cane, welcome back to I Catch Killers.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's good to having you back here, but the circumstances that we'd probably all be happier if I wasn't speaking to you. But there's been, it is what it is, isn't it? There's been some developments on Liesl's case. Now, I've explained to the audience about the background to the situation, and can you just tell us in your words what's occurred since we last had you on the podcast and spoke to you at the Coroner's Court? I think was the last time I saw you.
Yeah, so Coroner's finished and she went to basically think over what had been presented to her, and she was also taking some leave that had been pre-planned a while before, and then gave us a date that was it was on the date of my birthday, actually, that she presented her findings. And basically she found that Jim Church had killed Lisel. He was responsible for her death. And that if Lisel's remains were ever found, that she would reopen the case because the manner of death could not be ascertained, obviously. But she accepted the evidence that had been put before her, and she also mentioned to the AG there'd been a review, I think it was 2023, and a certain number of recommendations had not been implemented, one of which was recommendation 34. My understanding is that the coroner should not have to name a person as having done an action that has caused the death of another. I might be wrong.
Yeah.
It's all very much legal jargon and everything, but she was not impressed that none of the recommendations have been implemented from that review. And she also referred basically not our case, but more the circumstances in terms of the issue of abatement, which has been the biggest hurdle in terms of not getting a verdict, has asked the AG to refer that to the New South Wales Legal Commission for review to see whether there can be any sort of changes to the law on specific circumstances, such as what happened with Leisl, which is what she can do.
Yeah, I've been through the findings of the coroner, and there's some significant things in there. And from a personal point of view, for yourself and your family, caught in that limbo situation of sitting through I think it was 68 days hearing of a trial for the person that was charged with murdering Lisel, and then have that person kill themselves on the virtual day that the judge only, it was a judge only trial, was going to hand down the verdict. How distressing that would have been for the family, because you battled. It was a 10-year battle to get it to that point, basically, and then you're left in limbo with no one being accountable for what's happened to your sister.
Yep. Yeah, it was interesting because the detectives involved in the case also had different points of view as well, but the coroner actually found that quite helpful, she said, because it shows the amount of consideration that, or the variance of perspectives that is raised with terms of with the term of abatement and how that would apply. What I found really interesting was that not one family member from the defendant, none of his friends, nobody turned up to defend him or to say, no, the evidence you've presented is wrong. And they had the opportunity to do so and they declined. For everyone saying, oh, he didn't do it.
Where were they? And also on the thing, and when we first met, and this was the thing that I could tell was your frustration, but it was mine, having a bit more of an understanding about the legal system and about what it takes to convict someone of murder, or at least have a murder trial. All the evidence had been presented. Any defence opportunity that was available to him, it could have been taken during the trial. I could understand it would be a completely different situation if he had no opportunity to defend himself. But the system was set up to allow him to defend himself. And then...
Yeah, he had every availability to participate how he wanted to.
And then when we talk the abatement, I think we're talking in the legal terminology. We're talking about whether a decision can be made in the absence of the accused person when the person's passed away.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's my understanding.
Yeah, and I think the coroner, and we'll touch on it a little bit later in the recommendations that the coroner's made, but looking for legislation to be changed because, clearly a legal system should be there to serve the people it represents. And if justice is not done because of some antiquated legal principle, maybe that's when changes should be done. So I'm happy for you, and happy's a funny word to put when you're talking about the murder of your sister, but I'm happy at least someone has been identified as being responsible for the murder of Leisl.
I think it just confirmed, especially after listening to all the relevant evidence that was presented in coroners, because obviously there's different ways that the courts are run, criminal versus coroners. It just really cemented the conclusion I come to during the criminal court was that, he did it, and I have to commend the women that were his intimate partners that had been abused, quite extensively by church, who submitted affidavits in support of the criminal trial. It was never presented, basically because the DPP at the time felt that they had enough evidence, which is fine. Yep. But because it was relevant in in coroner's court, they looked at that. He was still perpetrating domestic violence, or rather violence against women, because there's nothing domestic about it, against the partner that he had when he died. So, I take my hat off to these women that even under fear and, fear of their life from him and the abuse that he perpetrated against them, stepped up, provided, and provided evidence to show that he had a history of it. He certainly had motive, and he had an extensive history of violence against women and animals as well, which, are huge red flags. So, look, the thing for me is that he can't appeal it. He
Yep.
can't say he didn't do it. It confirms what majority of us believed, even though we don't have a verdict. And I really hope that the AG takes on board what the coroner said and refers it as she's recommended, and stops another family from having to do this. It's just, it's not that it's not fair, but there was no need for it, I don't think. And I think if it can be prevented in the future, as I said, specifics with legislation and stuff, then it should be. People shouldn't be forced to go through this just because, as you said, there's an antiquated, law or reasoning that, that's because it's always been the way. Well, that's not good enough. And nor should it be.
And that was the frustration that was coming across with you when you were explaining the situation to me when we first met, that you've constantly been told, well, this is what we do. But the situation that presented yourself in this particular case is a unique set of circumstances. It's not going to happen very often, but it potentially could happen. And by changing the legislation, it's not going to open the floodgates. The world's not going to change. It'll just stop families like your family going through what you've gone through before. And it's interesting when all the evidence is presented at a coroner's inquest, because it's an inquisitorial, so the rules of evidence differ from the adversarial system that the criminal court is. But it just adds to the weight of evidence against him.
I think it certainly supported the case that the DPP had. It showed that, as I said, there was history and everything. I think the other thing in getting the law changed is that it acts as a deterrent. If people that are considering doing the same thing know that, well, you can do that, but this is what's going to happen regardless, then you can either take the chance, cop what gets said and appeal and, try and do it that way, or you just get named and that's it, and you don't have any chance of running an appeal, then I honestly think it will, act as a deterrent for people that are considering that path to try and get out of having to do time. That's just my personal opinion.
I hadn't. That's an interesting perspective. I hadn't even considered that. I was thinking more of the angst that would cause the families of loved ones. But yes, because it is a way that people could take out to protect their reputation, knowing the inevitable's coming. And, if I'm no longer here, my reputation, there'll still be an element of doubt. So that's a very valid point, And I think it's something that should be considered. You've got the coroner hand... Oh, sorry, go on.
No. I was just going to say, I think the two, acting as a deterrent and preventing angst for the family, go hand in hand.
Yeah.
There's innocent until presumed guilty, but at the same time, that shouldn't be in the pursuit of not causing a victim's family more angst than needed.
And it could be a case of dragging a court matter out until someone passes by natural causes, rather than suicide. So it shows that there's no benefits in delaying matters as well. So, no, I think it's a significant result that you've managed to get. Is it a double-edged sword in a way? Because you still, the person hasn't been held accountable why he's still on this earth, and you don't know the full details. Talk me through it from a personal point of view.
It's been something that I've had to work out what I'm happy with. Would I've liked him to be held accountable and be doing jail time, and his reputation in tatters? But at the end of the day, as I said before, it doesn't bring it back.
Yeah.
It doesn't change what he did. It doesn't mitigate the abuse that she went through, or the steps that he took afterwards to try and cover what he did. It at the end of the day, it doesn't change anything. Liesl's not here.
Yeah,
I can't do anything about that. Him being alive or not doesn't change that. I guess the biggest thing that I have felt was the best for me was that the coroner has named him as
Yes.
contributing or causing Liesl's death, rather, and the fact that he can't do anything about it. He's been named as causing the death of my sister. He can't appeal it. His family can't do anything. They certainly weren't interested in, defending his reputation or defending his character in Coronial court. And, that is forever on the record now.
Yeah.
And I think in the scheme of things, in the context of what's gone on, that was probably the best outcome that we were going to get. And as I said, something, mentioned before, something was better than nothing. That something, as you said, is quite substantial. It's not necessarily set a precedent, but it's shown that what happened was not okay. And so it provides, I guess, the founding blocks of things to be built upon for that. And if that's what's come of what's occurred, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I understand.
As I said, it just doesn't change anything.
No. One thing that you missed out on, the opportunity in a murder trial, is victim's impact statement, that you get up and you explain to the court what the person's actions has caused in regards to your life and the pain. What would you say to James Church now if he was still alive?
What I said in Coroners when I was allowed to speak, throughout the whole process, we had no input into any of the decisions that were made, and yet we suffered the consequences. I didn't decide to murder my sister because of a supposed event that, and there was some conjecture about whether Lisel was pregnant or not. I think she was, but that's a separate thing. I didn't ask for any of this. He had no right to do what he did, and the ways that has impacted me and my family, some we've worked out, others, I might never understand how it's affected me or my perspective. She had her life ahead of her.
Yeah.
And to think that someone felt they had the right to do that makes me so angry and upset. Who did he think he was to do that? What gave him the right to abuse his partners, or, commit violence against them? Like, I don't know whether I'd talk to him. I probably would just refuse to acknowledge his existence, in all honesty, Gary, because I think acknowledging his existence in some ways legitimises his behaviour, especially with what he did to my sister. And I will never, ever condone violence against another person. As much as you might want to do something because you're frustrated, thinking about it and carrying it out are two completely opposite, opposite things. There's that, no, I know it's wrong and therefore I won't do it. But it's just, he did something he didn't have the right to do, and I will never understand why he thought he did. And the stress and the angst and the pain and the impact that has had on my family, so my husband and my kids, as well as, my siblings and whatnot, I don't think that will ever be able to be quantified. And I don't think something like that can be for any family where, a member or a loved one's gone missing to be found murdered. I just think it's something that's so intangible and can't be measured or correlated or put in a way that can be measured objectively. That's what makes it so difficult to rest with while you're going through the system. It's not like you can say, I had 5 of these and now I've got 10 and now I've lost the lot, sort of thing. It's just, it's hard to verbalise it, but I just think that, we're expected to pay for something that we didn't necessarily want or have any input in, and I just,
it is hard.
hard.
It's hard to put into words. What what would you say the families faced with the battle that you've had, and it has been a battle for you to get it to this point, about you've shown resilience and tenacity to continue and fight for Liesl's memory. What would you advise families that might find themselves in similar situations where they're battling the system, so to speak?
You can only do what you can only do. I guess, I always hated when people said, time heals. Time doesn't heal.
Yeah.
And it is only one day at a time. You can't control other people's reactions or decisions. You can only do your own. And if that's all that you can manage, that's okay. And it doesn't matter whether, I liken it to a marathon.
Yeah.
You just keep plugging at it. If you take a week off because that's what you need to do for your mental health and you need to step away, that's okay. You're not going to forget them. It's not going to fall apart, whatever you're trying to achieve. It's not going to go away. It will still be there if you need to take a step away. Yeah. Spend time with family that are there, and, your mental health is important, because without that, you can't.
Yeah,
you can't function.
And I sadly I've seen too many families fighting for justice in a whole range of different forms, and part of the advice I give them is, if you've got to step away, and you articulated that very well, that you can step away and take a break, and then when you've rebuilt yourself, go for it again. I also got advice from Mark and Faye Leveson, who had a battle with a system and had to try something a little bit different and out of left field to recover their son. And Mark's words, and I pass his words on to a lot of people, just don't take no for an answer, because I would imagine if you just accepted what the system told you, we wouldn't be having this conversation now. And
probably not. I mean, no is not the worst thing that people can say. I've heard no a number of times, and it's like, well, okay, you said no. That just means that I need to work out how it can happen.
Yeah.
In a different way, like.
There are ways to achieve results. Let's. I'll just take you briefly through the findings, because it is good to hear it said publicly and the findings to be published. And this is the findings from the coroner in regards to Liesl's death. The person who died was Leisl Smith. The date of death: Lisel died on the 19th of August 2012 at some time after 2:02 p.m. Place of death: Lisel died at or somewhere in the vicinity of the Central Coast or Upper Hunter regions of New South Wales. The cause of death: Liesl's cause of death remains unknown. Manner of death: Liesl's death was a homicide. She was killed by James Scott Church. So you've got someone in the judicial system actually saying he's responsible. So, I would imagine that it gives you some comfort, not closure, not time heals all wounds, but it gives you some acknowledgement that at least the person responsible is being held accountable in some way.
Yeah, it does, because I was thinking about this the other day, funnily enough. We've got someone named, I know, personally, I know who did it, and it was him. And I think about families where it's 15, 20, 25, 30 plus years, and they're no closer to having an answer in terms of what happened or who did it, or, any sort of indication that, things are they're going to get some sort of answer. And I think in terms of that, compared to other people, I don't think we're incredibly lucky. I think the police did a fabulous job with what they had to contend with.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine being 30 years down the track and still not knowing what the hell happened to her like that. That would just be worst nightmare sort of stuff. So I think we are incredibly fortunate that, yes, she was missing, but there was circumstances that pointed to who who did it
Yeah.
based on his own actions, amongst other things. And I always think of those that, didn't have the opportunity that we did. That's I really just feel for them.
It's very generous of you, given what yourself and your family go through. You mentioned the police. The coroner also mentioned the police, and again, this is in the coroner's conclusions, and I'll just read out what she said about the police. I not only extend my gratitude to them, but I formally commend Detective Sergeants Jones, Hayden and Erickson and Miss Lawson for their work in this enormous and multifaceted investigation which enabled the matter to proceed to trial and ultimately which has enabled me to make my factual findings in this court. Just from a personal point of view, I like it when it's good work of police that get results. I've got to say, when I met the police when it was back at the inquest, I met some of the police there, and I was impressed by how much they cared, which carries a big thing in the way matters are investigated. I could tell that they genuinely cared. So kudos to the police, and you've already acknowledged that. So.
Yeah, the amount of work that they had to do and to go back and recheck and, consistently go back and make sure that, what they'd found or what was said to them was true was just enormous. I mean, he kept changing his alibis, he kept changing what he was saying. Everything had to be checked and double checked again to make sure that, there were no inconsistencies or discrepancies because, as you know, they can end up quite big in criminal court. It was phenomenal. I have the utmost respect for the work that they did. And then towards the end with the Coronial, in order to try and find where Lisel is, they had a specialist do some geo-mapping, but unfortunately the area is still, based on the information that they had, it still remains too large to sort of really pinpoint where she could be. And the terrain there is just really rocky and scrubby and whatnot. But it was just that extra effort. Like they went back again to try and, using the various techniques to try and find her, and they didn't have to.
Yeah.
They could have just done, we've done that and we can't find it. But they went back and tried again and tried different ways. And, obviously technology's improved a little bit. I'm still in touch with one of them and have been told that if I move up that way to touch base, which I really, really appreciate. Yeah. Unfortunately, one of them has left the force in part due to this investigation. And, I take my hat off, given the dynamics and a few other things that they would have had to deal with. It would have made investigating a lot more difficult. But they kept going, and to have a police officer or a detective rather apologise for not finding his sister, is confronting, and to be asked to forgive them for something that they didn't do wrong is just.
The fact, Jerildene, that they say that tells me that they care, and they're the type of people that you want on the case. They should take it personally, and it can come as a cost, but it brings a lot of peace to the families knowing you've got people that are genuinely trying to find out what happened. The coroner also made a comment about the legal team, and I know the nuances of any court matter, whether it be a murder trial or a coronial inquest. The standard can be set by the team that presents it. So I'll just read what the coroner said about the counsel assisting. Finally, I thank my counsel assisting team, Gabriel Bashir, Senior Counsel, Emma Sullivan and Peter Ava Jones, and their instructing solicitors, Elisa Wood and Alex McShane and Vivian Way, before them who diligently assisted me and ensured the fair and efficient conduct of these proceedings. So that's good in itself. It sounds like you got the A team for the inquest with the police and the counsel assisting, and it does make a difference. So your experiences from that?
They were fabulous.
Yeah.
They kept in touch, whether it was by email. We had a few meetings. They explained sort of what they were going to do, what they wanted to include, what they would go through in presenting the case to the coroner, explained why, they wouldn't do X, but they would do Y. They were really lovely. They were very considerate of how this may be re-traumatizing for us, especially after what had happened. So was the coroner. I couldn't fault them. It was very much an experience that I don't want to repeat, but was made a lot easier by the way that they handled it. And, they have my gratitude for that.
Again, that's it pleases me to hear that, because it can make a horrendous situation that little bit more bearable, having people like that. On the issue of changing the law, this is from the coroner's recommendations, so we'll just put this out there too, that the Attorney-General of New South Wales referred to the New South Wales Law Reform Commission arising from the facts in this case. The question of whether the doctrine of abatement operating in the criminal justice system should be reformed. For example, to consider whether there may be proceedings in which verdicts can be delivered in circumstances where an accused dies during the currency of their trial, and to consider, in particular, the operation of the doctrine in circumstances where deliberations of a judge alone or jury have concluded. A copy of these findings is to be included with the referral. So again, kudos to the coroner for Harriet Graham for making those recommendations, because clearly she saw something that needed to be fixed, and hopefully those recommendations will be put into place.
I hope so. She did not sound very happy with the fact that they had not been implemented. So hopefully they do what they're supposed to, and implement what they're supposed to. My understanding is that the coroner does not make recommendations lightly, especially in a case like this where there are potential, and substantial far-reaching legal ramifications and whatnot. And she sounded extremely frustrated that the recommendations of the review had not been implemented either. So I would assume, and I don't use that word lightly, that if a similar case ever came before her and nothing had been done, she would have a lot more to say about the fact that, the recommendations that she had made had not been taken seriously. And I would not like to be the person in the hot seat at that point in time.
Well, that's good, and that's why it's important to talk about it, because sometimes the squeaky wheel is the one that gets fixed, and if you keep it in people's faces, keep the attention there. Just finishing off, and I think what you've been through, but it tells me that Lisel hasn't been forgotten. How would you like your sister, to be remembered as? What type of person was she?
Personally, I'd like her to be remembered as she could have been anyone's sister. She could have been anyone's daughter, anyone's cousin. She could have been basically the girl next door that you grew up with. And, as I said, in Coroner's Court, I didn't agree with all of her decisions. I don't have to, but they were hers to make. And any one of us have made any number of the same decisions and not had the consequences that she did, and unfortunately for her, she paid with her life. But you always think that it's not gonna, it's not gonna happen to you or to one of your siblings. I think, a lot was said about Leisl in court. A lot of it was pretty horrendous to hear and wasn't very nice at all.
Yeah.
But, she had a way with animals. She loved animals. She, was kind. She was sensitive. She was someone who was trying to work out who she was, like any one of us.
Yeah.
I guess the biggest thing for her to be remembered as is that, she could have been as I said, anybody's daughter. She could have been your daughter or your sister. Don't forget that. She could have been any one of us. It was just she happened to be my sister. Yeah. She happened to be my kid's aunt. I will always remember her as a mischievous kid that got up to things that she shouldn't, and that I caught the brunt of sometimes, just being a kid, and I will treasure those. I really will. I wish I had gotten to know her as an adult.
Yep.
Unfortunately, that was taken away. I don't know what she would have been like. I speculate on that, and I like to think that she would have ended up being really lovely and gotten things together, but I'll never know. So I've only got what I've got to think of. She was who she was.
Well, I think you've demonstrated the love and your family that you had for Leisl, and the way that you have fought as hard as you can, appropriately, to get some form of justice. And full kudos to you. We've spoken a lot of times and over a long time, and I know the battles and the emotional roller coaster you've been on, and you should be very proud of yourself on what you've done. And taking on the system is not easy, and you took on the system. You had to change the thinking, and you got results, and you've paved the way for other people if they find themselves in this situation. So full credit to you, and you can know that you've done everything that you possibly could do. In memory of your sister.
Thanks, Gary. Well, it certainly didn't happen without your help, that's for sure.
Oh, I appreciate that. No, I was honoured to help in any way I could, or any little way that I could. So thanks for reaching out to me, and you should be proud of yourself, and well done.
Thanks, Gary.
Well, I'm happy for Jerildene and the family that they've been given some answers for what happened to Lisel. It's good when the legal system accept that laws are not always perfect and acknowledge that sometimes they might need to be changed. Jerildene is an example for all families battling the justice system. Sometimes you just got to keep fighting to get the justice you're seeking. And as for James Church, well, I have no sympathy for him whatsoever. His actions destroyed lives, and he didn't even have the courage to be held accountable.